Today, we have a man who I have a tremendous amount of respect for. I'll start by paraphrasing Booker T. Washington. I do not judge a man by what he has achieved, instead by the obstacles he's overcome. The man in front of me is the epitome of that message. He's dealt a terrible hand in life, but never played the victim. And today, he owns and operates his own demolition company with over 100 employees still, right? Okay, so that's quite a big operation. Many people think of demolition as a bunch of toothless idiots with sledgehammers. You offended by that? This guy has brought precision and professionalism to his work in a way that not only sets him apart from all demo contractors, but all contractors that I have personally worked with across the country. Please welcome the owner of Wildcat Renovation, Al Miller. Al, how you doing?
Doing great. Glad to be here.
Happy to have you here. So let's get right into it. I want to, before we get into the business, I really want to hit the rewind button. I want to go back to the beginning. Where'd you grow up, and what was life like from like birth to junior high?
Okay. So I was born in Ann Arbor, Michigan. 48 years old. I lived all over the Midwest. I came from a divorced family, like a lot of kids probably in our generation do and still do today. My parents were both in academia, so they all had PhDs. My parents remarried, and so all four of them had PhDs, some of them multiples. So, but I spent most of my time kind of being bounced around from different college towns. Spent time in Iowa, time in Detroit, time in Indiana. I lived with my mother until the time I was about 12, and then I was sent to live with my father in inner city Detroit. When I was sent with my father, he wasn't expecting me to be there. So it was like one day I was in Iowa, next day I was in Detroit. I spent a year living with my father, and at that point, he decided that he was going to put me in an institution, and I don't know if he didn't want to be a father anymore. He thought it was the best thing for me. Pretty tough.
Okay, so it sounds like kind of like a Big Daddy situation, like if you remember the movie Big Daddy, where the kid shows up at Adam Sandler's doorstep and he wasn't expecting him.
I don't like that.
So when you start out saying that there was a lot of education and PhDs going around, I wouldn't really expect that to be the case for you.
So very well published, very big professor, but maybe not the best at parenting. That wasn't a big part of his skill set. So I was put in an institution when I was 13 years old.
What do you mean by institution?
So the institution that I was put in was, they touted it as a drug rehabilitation for teenagers, although I had never done any drugs. So it was touted as this place for troubled teens, although I wasn't a troubled teen. I was a good kid.
So was it like a boarding school? Like were you living there all the time?
Yeah, the name of the facility was Straight Incorporated. It actually was closed down 2 months after I got out. There's a whole story behind that.
Okay.
So it was actually closed down for abusive children, hurting kids, the techniques that they use, stuff like that.
So is this like late 80s, early 90s?
So this would have been late 80s, early 90s.
I feel like when you watch like all the ghost shows and stuff like that, it's like all of these types of facilities like closed down in 1986. I feel like they all closed down around that time.
It was so when I lived in Iowa with my mother, I mean, I had 3 paper routes, one before school, one after school, one on Wednesdays. I had a mowing company called Miller Mowing Service. I was a good kid, right? She remarried to my stepfather. Him and I didn't get along, so I was literally sent to Detroit. And literally I thought I was going for a week or a weekend, and suddenly I was living in Detroit. After a year of being with my father, and I was pumped into the inner city school system, so I was the only white kid in an entire black school, and I came from Iowa, so you can imagine what that lifestyle was like. It was very difficult. So I would get circled up by a bunch of guys, and I'd have to hit the first one that I could hit because they were going to hit me.
Right.
So learned really quick. It was because of that. My father kept saying, quit getting in trouble, quit getting in trouble. I kept saying, Dad, I'm not doing anything wrong. These kids are jumping me every day. I'm in Detroit Public Schools. I'm from Iowa. What do you want me to do? I'm white. So the whole race thing that gets played today, I mean, I've been on the other side of that, right? So I know what that looks like. So long story short, he sends me this facility called Straight that he thinks is going to be great. I'm there, which it's not. I'm there from the time I'm 13 till I'm almost 18. Wow. During that time, I never went to school. They said you went to school, but you basically sat in a room and read a novel for 2 hours, right? You were never allowed to go to the bathroom by yourself. You never saw television. You never listened to the radio. They controlled everything you saw, everything you did, and they tried to make you conform to this series of like their ideology so they tried to strip you down to nothing, remove all your identity, and then build you into what they wanted. In this facility, you like literally would be in a room that you'd have to sleep with like 5 other kids, and the only thing that in the room would be mattresses and sheets. That's it.
Wow.
If you had to go to the bathroom, there was a jug in the corner. It was as hardcore as you could imagine. If you tried to get out, they would tackle you, restrain you, slam you to the floor.
So what were the other kids like? I mean, I know you said that you got beat up a lot and stuff like that, but like, I mean, like, how does a young person at that age put in that situation with what seems like no support? Like, what mindset did you have, and what effect did the other kids have on you?
So, great question. So, in that facility, it was a lot like Lord of the Flies. So, once they got they called them newcomers to conform, okay, they would start following their processes. So, basically, the kids that had been there a long time realized you're not escaping, you're not getting out, and either you're doing part of this program or you're going to be the kid getting slammed on the ground. So either you're doing the slam or getting slammed. I mean, that was your choices. So I was there until I was almost 18 years old. I got out right before I turned 18 years old. When I got out, I basically left. That was in metropolitan Detroit, but in that facility, you never left. I mean, you were in that facility.
I'm picturing a prison situation where when you get out, you don't even know how to process the real world.
Because you haven't seen it. You haven't seen television. You haven't listened to the radio. You have no idea how to interact with anybody. You have no idea how to go to school, how to function. You only know like that.
So was there any kind of saving grace or mentor, father figure in there at all? Or is this just Al against the world? You got to figure it out yourself.
World, man, figure it out. You know, I mean, obviously I made friends in there. Like eventually you start, you've been in there for years. So you get to know people.
You talk to any of them still?
That. No. Most of the kids who are in that program are either in prison or dead, or committed suicide. 100%. I don't know where any of them are.
Wow. So no mentorship. So one of my first episodes that I did was about the value of mentorship and the importance of it. I knew a little bit of your story. I didn't realize that you were basically in like a prison situation where like it's something like a mix between the military and prison. It sounds like, right? Where they try to strip you of your identity and you're a jarhead to a degree.
Very much. And the challenges were like if you didn't conform, I mean, they would put you in these rooms and they would basically have what they call marathons, and these other kids would just scream at you over and over and over and over and over, and they would use sleep deprivation tactics. So you might stay up for 24 hours, 30 hours. It was really, really hard.
So were you aware of like how fucked up that was?
Yeah, because I was a kid from Iowa who like had 3 paper routes and like
so like you had a normal life and then you were thrown in here
into this whole horrible nightmare. So
were you like counting down the days? Were you like scratching on the wall? Like
probably a little bit of both, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, it was or a lot of that. After a while, you just want to get out.
Were there any positive effects, do you think?
I learned how to be strong. I learned how to handle things myself. I learned how to be a man, quite frankly.
You must have learned some kind of patience.
And probably a lot of patience, right? So those skills, though, like the whole time that you're there, you only want to get out. But once you get out, you don't really know what to do because you only know that.
So what did you do? Like, it sounds like you came out aware of the situation that you were put in. How did you process the world, and did you seek out any mentorship? Were you trying to address the situation? Like, what did you do to tackle the world when you got out?
So as soon as I got out, I went and I knew how to cut grass, right? So now I'm just 18 years old. I'm out of this facility. Don't really know how to go to school or anything like that. So at the time, I was sleeping in a car. I'd bought a car that didn't run. And so there was a landscaping company that was going through this apartment community, and I ran up to one of the guys and said, hey, I know how to cut grass. Can I get a job? And the guy's like, what? Who are you and where are you coming from? And I said, well, listen, I just got out of this facility. I'm kind of living in this car over here. I can really use a job. And so he had me go talk to the foreman, who happened to be there. And the foreman said, sure, kid, I'll give you a job if you know how to weed whip. So literally I started working for that landscaping company right out. I started couch hopping with those guys, right? So those guys kind of took me under the wings. But keep in mind, I'm an 18-year-old kid. I've been in this facility for years. I get out. I don't know what the world is even like, right, outside of that facility. These guys are trying to help me and kind of, to your point, mentor me a little bit. But these are just some working guys, and they're just like normal guys. It wasn't until I had been out maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3, and it was raining one day, okay? And if I didn't work and I didn't make money, I wouldn't eat because there was no support system whatsoever. I mean, as soon as I got out, obviously I didn't want to talk to my father. I mean, he had put me in there, right?
Yeah.
You know, my mother, who shipped me to Detroit, I mean, I haven't spoken to her since I left when I was, 12 or 13, right? So there's no support system. So it's raining one day. I'm living in this car, and across the street from this apartment community is like a day labor staffing service, like a Manpower or Labor Ready. I don't remember what it was called, but I went over there and I said, "Hey, do you guys have any work? I work for the landscaping company, and it's raining." And they said, "Can you do some road construction?" And I said, "I'll do anything you guys want." So they literally drove me to a place, and it was a concrete sawing and drilling firm. I had never heard of that. I didn't know that was a thing. And I walked in there the first day, and they basically said, "All right, you're going to go with this guy in his truck." Okay. And so here pulls in this guy, and is 27 years old. He's got a mullet, which is cool at the time. It's kind of cool again, I guess, if you're younger.
In Florida, anyway.
Yep. He's got a gold chain on. He's got a cool car, and he literally hops in the truck, and he's like, "Hey, so you're going to be my helper for the day." I still don't know what to expect. We get in this truck, and we drive away, and he's like, "Hey, I need to go by my house. I forgot something." This is long before cell phones or any of this stuff. So he pulls up to me what looks like a mansion. Now it's just a single story red brick home with a 2-car front loading garage. But to me, it might as well have been a mansion, right? And out walks this most beautiful woman, and she's got all this jewelry on, and here comes 2 dogs running out. And I'm looking at this guy, and I can't quite get my head around it. And he gets back in the truck, got his wallet, whatever he forgot. And he's like, "All right, let's go." And I looked at him and I said, "How did you get all of this?" He's like, "Get all what, kid?" I'm like, "I don't know, your life. How'd you get all this? You got the hot wife, you got the house, you got the car. I mean, you even got the mullet, man. How'd you get all this?" He's like, and he looked at me and he goes, "If you learn how to run these saws or this concrete cutting technology, you can have all of this." So the point about mentorship, it wasn't until I met him, his name was Todd Jewell, that I really had that. From that moment, I was hooked. So literally, even though I was just hired for the day, when we got to the job site, he would say, "Hey, go get me a wrench." I didn't even know what wrench to get, so I'd bring the whole thing in. I'd run up to him and be like, "Here's all the wrenches. Which one do you want?"
Can't get the wrong one if you get them all.
Yeah, I got them all. I got the whole toolbox. I mean, I could barely pick it up. I was 160 pounds soaking wet. So at the end of the day, he literally went back to the boss and said, "I really like Al. I'd like him to come back tomorrow." So I quit the landscaping company and I started going back, and I worked directly under this guy for about 3 weeks to a month. It was about this point that the boss, his name was Joe Pavakovich, had basically kind of caught wind that I was this kid and I had been in this institution and I was living in this car, and but I was kind of house jumping with just guys in these neighborhoods. And so he brought me into his office and he said, "What's your story?" And I kind of gave him the cliff notes that I've shared with you today. And he said, "All right, you're working hard. I'm going to give you a chance." And that day, he agreed to loan me $1,000. Now, $1,000 back in 1993 or 2 or whatever it was, he might as well. I had $100 in my name, right?
Right.
And I'd worked. I didn't even work for this company yet. I was just like a
day labor guy.
Day labor guy, right? He said, "I'm going to hire you on full time. You're going to come work here. I'm going to put you in the operating engineers union. So you're going to go into an apprenticeship program. I'm going to loan you $1,000. I'm going to help you get an apartment, and I'm going to get you a bicycle so you can get to work. Don't screw me." And I looked at that man with the utmost respect, and I said, "Joe, I was obviously overcome with emotion because finally was somebody who was going to help me." So at that point, my entire life was learning how to run concrete cutting equipment, which eventually evolved into demolition as well, which is kind of what we started with. So from that point, literally, I was working for him and riding my bicycle, and I was in the operating engineer's apprenticeship, and I'd be the first one to work, the last one to leave. and this is in metropolitan Detroit. So in the winter it gets really cold, and a lot of times in construction, so they'll lay guys off, and I would be like, I'll work in the shop, I'll do anything you guys want. And so I worked under Todd Jewell for 3 years as his apprentice. And 3 years later, then I became an operator. And so now, by this point in my life, now I had, a nice apartment. I was able to buy a truck, motorcycle. My life's starting to come together, because I have these two guys at work who've mentored me, right?
Sure.
They've taken me under their wing, and they've helped me. But it wasn't up until that point that I had that support system.
Let me ask you this. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of kids out there in similar or worse situations, right? Mm-hmm. And I feel like a lot of the people that you were in there with growing up, I mean, you already said a bunch of them wound up in jail or dead, right? So why cut lawns? Why demo? I'm sure a bunch of them went straight to crime and were eaten just the same or turning money just the same. Like, what was different about you compared to the other 99 kids that probably went down the wrong path?
Because when I left Iowa, I knew that I was a good kid, and I just had bad parents. And just because parents make bad choices doesn't mean you have to as a person, right? Like, we're all dealt a hand. And our lives are basically the sum of our choices. So if we make positive choices consistently, positive things will happen. If you make negative choices, negative things will happen. I mean, so literally, if you go down I saw so many kids like in that facility that basically like there were kids in there who were on drugs. There were kids who were, it still was not a good facility. So I would never, that facility was horrible. And like I said, it was shut down. But there were kids in there who were really like troubled teens who maybe their parents thought they were doing the right thing for them because they didn't know what else to do with them. I was on the other side of that because I was just a kid who was a good kid who lived in Iowa, whose parents just didn't want to be parents. They were so consumed with being in academia and being published and being these big professors, and that they didn't care about being parents, right? But I wasn't going to let their choices define me as a person, right? So I think the difference between me and them is I've always understood that just because they suck doesn't mean you have to, and you don't use it as an excuse like to say that, oh, my parents didn't love me, so I'm going to go smoke crack. I mean, what a cop-out piece of shit thing to say, honestly. I mean, I don't know.
No,
right?
you're
right.
Listen, I think you're 100% right. And, one of the things that I admired about you immediately when I met you, and I already alluded to it, is the absence of a victim mentality. And I think that way too many kids, too much of our youth today has that victim mentality. It's like a competition. And you didn't seem to have that. I'm sure a bunch of kids that you were in that facility with did.
For sure.
Right? And it clearly didn't work out. So what would you say to somebody who doesn't want to be a victim, who doesn't want to rely on a government handout, who doesn't want to sit there and wallow in their own pity because of the hand that they were dealt? You put yourself out there to mow a lawn, and then you put yourself out there, and when you showed interest in working hard and doing whatever it took and whatever kind of work they would throw your way, no matter what the condition was, they turn that investment around on you. So for somebody else that's young and in that situation and just doesn't know where to look, what do you say to them? Where do they start looking? How do they do it?
Well, if they come to Wildcat Renovation, my company, I'll give them a job.
You hear that, guys? So if you're in the Fort Myers area down in Florida, reach out to me. I'll hook you up with Al. Al will pay it forward. Okay?
Yeah, 100%. And I can say as a business owner with over 100 employees today, one of the most rewarding things of my job and of my company is I do the same thing for my guys that Joe did for me all those years ago, right? For the right guys, not all guys. To your point, some of them have that victim mentality, oh, woe is me, oh, woe is me. But to answer your question, what would I say to them is all of that, quite frankly, all of that pain and hurt, right, of living a sort of normal life back in Iowa, right? The paper routes, the landscaping business, right? The mom, the sister, the stepdad. I mean, he was a dick, but it was a normal, whatever, semi-normal situation. To have that ripped out from away from me, to be shoved in a horrible institution, to then get out and have to rely on myself at a really young age. I mean, I was barely 18 years old. I mean, that's really young. And to take all of those emotions, you can either take those and play the victim card, or you can take those and prove all of those people wrong, right? And you're proving them, I'm going to put you in this institution because you ain't worth a shit. Oh, watch this. I'm going to build a $20 million a year business, employ over 100 people, have a beautiful wife, beautiful kids, big house, cool stuff, and pay it forward. Or I can play the victim and be like, woe is me, and go do drugs, right? So those are the choices we make. I think too much today in our society, being a man is like a bad thing now, right? Like if you're a masculine guy, like that's supposedly not cool or something like that. Where I totally disagree with that. I think being a man is taking that pain and that suffering and that hurt and turning it into something positive and using that as strength, using that as fuel, right? To get out of your situation and move away from your situation. One of the reasons I became so successful was not because I was some, business genius. I've never even graduated from high school. It's because I was able to take that hurt and turn it around and say, okay, Dad, so you don't want anything to do with me? Watch me. And while I haven't spoken to him in many, many years, right, I know that whatever they thought or whatever they did, they're so wrong. And now they're the ones missing out, right? They've never met their grandkids. They've never seen how successful I've become because they don't need to, because I know. So hopefully that answers that question. I think it answers it 100%. And you and I have a parallel in that, right? Like I have a parent that I guess kind of let me down in the loving me department, but I look at anything negative that I got from either of my parents growing up and I look at it and I am determined not to be that for my son, right? I'm determined to be a bigger and better man, to be a giant so that he can stand on my shoulders and reach for higher things. And I see the same thing in you. And I think you and I both did the same thing when I was 12, 13 years old, that I started ripping roofs in Boston, right? Like that was my start. I was just willing to do whatever it took just to get my foot in the door, just to learn and just to get cash flow and money going. Now I gave it to, my mom at home who God knows where that money went. I thought I was paying the bills. Very clearly was not when the cable went out, right? But the point is you got to find a way to put yourself out there. Go on Google. You didn't have Google in 1992. I didn't really have Google in 2002, right? You just find a way to reach out to these companies and put yourself out there and play a numbers game, right? Like just keep reaching out until somebody like an Al Miller or an Ike is going to see you and want to pay that forward. If you go back to, I think it's episode 1 or 2, one of the clips in there, I talk about how important it is to find the right mentorship, but you got to put yourself out there. And the only thing better than that is to turn around and be that for somebody else, right? So that's awesome that you just said that. Extremely profound, extremely valuable, and I really hope that young people pause, rewind, listen to that again because it's so important. So now you're 18, you're learning a skill, right? That's going to keep you fed for the rest of your life. Yep. Most guys would just keep doing it, right? Like the guy that you were talking about initially sounded like a foreman or something like that. Maybe a crew. Crew leader or something like that, right? I know at some point you looked at it and you said, screw this, I can do this better than all these guys, right? Yep, so what was that moment and where'd you go from there once you realized that you wanted to reach for bigger and better things and create that $20 million business with 100 guys and all that stuff? So as I'm working for Joe and working under Todd, and then I become an operator, right? The natural born entrepreneur in me. So we go back to, when I'm in Iowa and I got these, one kid has one paper out and that's good for him. Mm-hmm. Well, I had one before school, one after school, and an extra one on Wednesdays because I liked money. Right. Okay. Because money, affords you the ability to do things that you can't do obviously without it, right? Mm-hmm. It buys you freedoms. That's the reality of it. So as I'm working for these guys, I'm already realizing that what we're doing cutting concrete is so physically demanding, and it is. It's a very, very physical job. There's no way I'm going to be able to do this for 30 years, whatever my career is going to be, right? And I like to talk to people, quite frankly. And this is before they had the equipment that I see your guys working with now, where it's a freaking joystick. This is before we had radio-controlled demolition robots and all this. you were slinging diamonds, and I mean, it was hard work. So anyway, so I wanted to get into sales. Okay, so I knew that I as soon as I had learned the trade, then I wanted to figure out how to sell it. And I think that was just a natural, growth piece for me. It was like I had accomplished this goal, and so now I want to learn how to sell it. So
could you have sold without knowing it?
No, it would have been very difficult. I mean, very difficult, because you wouldn't understand all the nuances, right? So by learning it from the ground up, being the labor carrying the box of wrenches, because you don't know the difference between, an open and a closed-headed wrench or whatever, a crescent wrench or a pipe wrench, starting from the ground up, you learn all the nuances. So I went to my boss and I said, hey, I'd like to get into sales. Now this is, 4 or 5 years later. So, I mean, I've paid him back the $1,000. I've worked hard for him. And he kind of chuckled and he said, I knew we were going to have this conversation sometime, Al, but you are only like 24 or whatever at the time. He goes, you got a long time and we're not trying to grow the business. So at that point, his business, he had like 15 service trucks and maybe 30 guys, 35 guys. And he was happy where he was. He wasn't looking to turn it into a Wildcat renovation, right? So I had actually stayed in contact with one of the kids from the program. Well, I haven't spoken to him in many, many years. At this point, I still had some contact. And this is when payphones still existed. So I went and called him, and I actually went to Indianapolis to visit him for the weekend. On that trip to Indianapolis, I went to some other concrete sawing and drilling companies and solicited them as a salesman. And I said, listen, I'm an operator, okay, but I'd really like to do sales for you, and I'm coming out of the Detroit market. A company ended up offering me a job, so I ended up going back to Detroit, talked to Joe, and I was hoping, quite frankly, that I would just leverage him to put me in sales. That was like my real goal. Yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
That was my real goal. Like, oh, okay, Al, no problem. We'll put you in sales. It's okay. Instead, he actually stood up from his desk, told me he was really proud of me. Actually, that actually kind of choked up some emotion, because it was a big deal in my life, right? Because he had helped me get out of the car and he'd helped me get this apartment, and now I'm moving up, and he's proud of me, right? He's like, good for you. And he shook my hand. He actually gave me a big hug and said, are you going to work your 2 weeks, right? I'm like, of course I'm going to work my 2 weeks. I'll work as long as you ask me to work.
So boom, gone. You went to Indianapolis.
Yep. So I go to Indianapolis.
Wait, talk about the balls that it took for you to sell yourself to these companies, because you pretty much cold called them, right?
Yep.
And I know a lot of young people today, whether it's fear of rejection or just staring at their phone, they can't pick up the phone and call somebody.
So I did more than that, and I would encourage anybody listening to do more than that. So back then, you would have to look things up in a phone book, and most kids don't even know what that is today.
And then break out a map and go find it.
You got 100%. You had to know how to read a map too, right? And you're in another city, and there's no cell phone, there's no GPS. I mean, whatever. So I literally looked up concrete cutting in the phone book, and then the first one was ABC concrete cutting, just because it's alphabetical order.
Right there.
So I literally drove to their facility, walked in the front door and said, hi, my name's Al Miller. I'm an operator from Detroit, Michigan, and I'm looking to see if you guys are hiring for salesmen, because I really want to get sales. There's no concrete I can't cut. I have great skills. I'm not looking for that job. I'd like to do sales. How would young people do that is, I think you just have to know that it's okay to go in there and say that. And if they said, I'm sorry, Al, we're not looking for that right now. We'll accept the, application and we'll keep it on file. I would have went to whatever B. They started with A. I would have went to B. It's just keep going. I would have went to B. And if they said no, I would have kept going to C and D. Now, if I went all the way down that list, me being the way I am, that probably would have told me, because as I've gotten older, I have pretty strong faith in God. I would probably say, okay, that's God's will. He wants me to stay in Detroit.
Right.
Okay, because I put myself out there. I've done all this, and maybe it's not my time. Maybe I'm supposed to stay with Joe. But the fact that I went there and the first one said, okay, that told me it was time to go. Now, leaving, the metropolitan Detroit area to move to Indianapolis, I'm still only 24, 25 years old. I still have no support system, and now I'm going to leave Joe and the guys who've kind of taken care of me. So that was a big, scary move in my life, quite frankly. It wasn't like I had a dad to call, hey, I'm moving here, I'm doing this. It's not like that. So, I loaded up my Camaro and drove to Indianapolis and started a new life.
I think selling in managing, like if you want to be any kind of executive in any kind of industry or anything like that, you have to be able to communicate in a way that can sell, in a way that can manage to people, right? So if you can't even do that, like if you want to be successful in any way and you can't even get the chutzpah together to cold call somebody and just ask for an opportunity, you're never going to deserve to be in that seat. So if you, whether it's building the confidence or the balls or the skill or whatever it is, you got to do it by throwing yourself out there.
100%.
It's never going to come back.
Every time. And not be afraid that if they say no, just because that guy said no, it may have nothing to do with you. It may have to do with, like Joe, he didn't want to grow the company anymore. Right? Or maybe they already have that position filled.
So you said something that I got to go back to because the podcast has got a bunch of eyes on it. And in one of the posts, the comments section is going off. And one of the most common comments that I have coming in right now are that the owners of companies don't care about their workers, that it's backbreaking work, and that, oh yeah, I mean, you might make a decent wage today, but you'll be, hunched over and won't be able to stand up at 50, right? And you kind of alluded to that. There's two things that I know, right? First of all, it's not as laborious, right? Like because of the tools that are available, especially somebody like yourself that invests in equipment. But I also know that you care about your employees, because that's the other thing, right? Like they think that like the man is standing on top of the company and he's literally like slave driving people at low wages and all they care about is their bank account and not the people. And I know with you that is not the case.
100%. In fact, I think if you talk to any of my staff members, they would say that I am an owner that cares because I have been there, right? I am the guy who's lived in the car. And the reason that Wildcat has gotten so big is not because I set out to build 110 or 120 person operation. It's because as I hired guys and they worked with me, I wanted to create opportunities. They would come to me and say, Al, I want more. And I say, okay, well, what does that look like? Well, I don't want to be in the field forever. All right, well, that means we're going to need, I'll give a great illustration. I have a general superintendent who's been with me for 17 years, okay? He was my first concrete cutter who worked for me. Mm-hmm. When he started with me, it was me and him and a couple guys. That was it. And as the company grew, right, he said, I want to go into management. I said, well, to do that, we're going to need 15 crews. I mean, I don't have it has to grow.
You need people to manage.
We need people to manage.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
what are we going to manage each other here?
Yeah, right.
So I said, once we get to a size, then you'll move into that position, right? So then we worked as a team, him and I, to grow the company. And then as we got more and more crews, now he manages all those crews as the general superintendent. Same thing with project managers. Same thing as general manager. Same thing as shop manager. All the guys who work for me who are managers started out in the field.
Sure.
They didn't just come in and become managers. So to the person who's saying the guy at the top doesn't care, I would call that bullshit. Then they're either working for the wrong person or they haven't found the right place to be, because not all companies are like that. Some companies like Wildcat are built on a team atmosphere where when the company does well, everybody does well. Right?
And I think, so you hit on something twice. Jordan Peterson talks about this all the time, that, one of the reasons that there is a gender pay gap, right, is because men have more of a tendency to go ask for more, right? So women just don't have the tendency to go to their boss and say, hey, here's where I want to be. How can I get there? What can we do to get me there? And have that conversation. You did that, basically sent you packing, right? Which was fine because you found but it started with that conversation 100%. Before you found another opportunity to go to and then grow. And the way that your guys are moving up is, number one, they got to do their time, but you're not going to know that as a manager, that it's not even going to be on your radar that they're looking for growth if they don't come to you and express that.
I actually create the opportunity for the format for them to do that. Mm-hmm. So what I've done in my company is basically everyone who's hired, it doesn't matter whether you were hired as the laborer, on this crew and you're the lowest guy on the totem pole, or you're hired as a skilled mechanic who went to college and you're wrenching on excavators or whatever, to an office staff member, right? Maybe like the girl who runs HR, okay? Mm-hmm. Once you work at my company, we have a review at 90 days. I spend with over 111 people. I spend a lot of time doing this, believe you me. So we have a review at 90 days, and we talk about your performance and how you're doing, and to your point, where do you want to go? What is your career goal? You know, do you just want to be the laborer on the demo crew and you're cool for there forever? Or are you trying to become the next GM? What is your track? And all of this is documented in their folder. Then at 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 17 years, we meet once a year and we sit down and we talk about what are your goals? How much money did you make? What are your benefits? What's your average hours worked? What do you like about the job? What don't you like about the job? What do you need? And we have conversation. And literally, I have a couple, like a bunch of these every week because of how it just goes, right? To make sure that those opportunities are created, right? Back to the general superintendent point, I always knew that's where he wanted to go. So we made sure that he got there, right? I have some guys who've worked for me for over a decade. And literally, I'll meet with them once a year and say, hey, man, how you doing? Doing great. Hey, listen, you're working an average of 56 hours a week. You're making $20 an hour. Here's what you've been doing, whatever. Do you want to move up? No, Al, I'm cool right where I'm at. I'm like, okay, well, you do understand you're kind of maxed out at that pay rate, right? Like I can give you a little tick for the cost of inflation, but I mean, you're right here. If you want more money, I can pay you more, but you got to take on more responsibility. No, Hefe, no boss, I'm good.
Bingo.
Cool.
Bingo. If you want more money, you have to take on responsibility, right? And not everybody wants that. Like I again, like some people think that, oh yeah, you're going to sit in the trade and you're going to max out and you're never going to get a pay raise. And it's like, not all the guys want the responsibility. I know plenty of people that have gone from the field to the office, back to the field because they're like, dude, I don't want to deal with this shit.
100%. Happens all the time. I have some what we call right-hand guys. So they're like, you have the crew chief and then like his right-hand guy. Right-hand guy is one step away from being the next crew chief.
Right.
And literally I'll meet with them and I'll say, are you ready? Nope. Why? I mean, they run, when the crew chief goes on vacation, they run the crew.
Yeah.
When the crew chief calls off, they run the crew. I'm like, I'll give you a $3 raise. Please take the job. I want to grow my company more.
Right.
Nope, I'm cool right here. Now that's their choice and that's okay. But then they understand why they are where they are, right? They can't get mad. They can't get upset. They understand. They also understand if they'll take on the more responsibility, here comes all of the rewards with that, right? So it goes hand in hand. But for me and my company, the one thing that was really important is that I always wanted my guys to know that A, I was accessible, right? B, a lot of times in the trades, guys will say, oh, my boss hasn't talked to me for 2 years, and then they'll walk through the shop and they'll try and grab him. Hey, boss, I need to talk to you 1 second. I need a raise. What I say in my company is respect given is respect earned. I'm going to give you the respect to sit down and take time with you to sit down and talk, but that is respect earned, so don't grab me when I'm walking through the shop and have that conversation, right? We'll do it at the appropriate time. We'll talk about it, and if it makes sense, we're going to do it. If it doesn't, we're not.
So that's leadership right there. And Al's said it a couple times. It's like you might not be in the right situation. And one of the best ways to know that is to have a good mentor, right? Somebody to put you either in your place, never be too high, never be too low, be level-headed, and make sure that somebody's guiding you or at least acting like a soundboard for you. One thing that I want to jump back to real quick before we wrap up is the labor itself, right? I really want to make sure people understand that the industry is not the back-breaking industry that it used to be. People work hard. You still want strong men doing certain things, right? Or strong people doing certain things. But there are a lot of tools out there now that weren't there 20, 30 years ago. And in demo specifically, like you would think that it would be way more laborious than it is in some cases.
So what's great about our industry is guys who work in the demolition industry, specifically for Wildcat, get to work with all kinds of cool tools and equipment every day, right? So people hear the word demolition, and you initially said they think of guy with 3 teeth and one's in his pocket and he's all jacked up. And that's not what Wildcat looks like. In fact, we have technology that we have radio-controlled demolition robots that young guys who are good at video games are usually really good running these robots because they're really good with joysticks.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it literally looks like an Xbox controller. These guys on site, like robots, are rolling through, tearing down walls. Like it is so cool.
Yep.
And Al, you would think that like in bigger markets like New York or something like that, like they would have these pieces of equipment. They do not. Al does. Right? Not everybody has them because he invests in his company and because he wants to take care of his guys and he wants to be more efficient, right? So he makes huge amount of investments in the equipment that he has, but he gets a return on it.
Yep, 100%.
Right?
And in addition, so when you own technology like that, A, you don't burn your men out, right? B, you're teaching them if they can run an excavator, they can run these robots. So then it's basically like a good seamless transition, right? So a guy who can run a robot can run an excavator, a guy who can run an excavator, run a robot. You have to be real careful because we run robots inside of buildings and maybe we're not taking everything down. So it's a very precise thing. But it goes more than that. I mean, so what's really cool about our industry is one day a guy might be working on an excavator tearing the back of a building off. So he's working with heavy iron. That's super cool, super fun. The next day, he might be in an air-conditioned space, being on a ride-on floor scraper, tearing up floors. The next day, he might be working, with one of the robots, tearing down concrete walls inside of a building somewhere. It's always different. It's always changing. And honestly, it's always fun because it's never the same thing. So in our trade, we get variations. So we run between 18 and 20 sites a day. So that's, 18 to 20 different crews doing different things. And one guy gets assigned to one this time, and then he's doing something different. And then guys actually start getting their favorite stuff. So then they might come in their review and they might say, man, I really like running the Brocs. That's what the robots are called as a manufacturer. So then we try and put that guy on more Broc jobs. Or maybe one guy really likes running excavators. He's just really into it. So we try and put him on that. So the goal for an owner like me is to create a culture where everybody's rewarded, opportunity is created, advancement is always there, and that's how we've gotten so big, and we continue to grow, but also providing the guys with the tools, equipment, and technology so that if they're choosing to be that guy just on the crew, right, that he can do it for 20 or 30 years. Because once you learn the trade, it's more valuable to me as an owner, right? Like I'm not retraining the guy. I would like him to move up, but if he chooses not to, he fits that mold, for a long time. If you turn and burn him, it's not good for the business. It's not good for culture.
I can say this firsthand that I have tried to press Al to go faster, right? I've tried to press Al into tighter schedules and to mobilize faster and do things out of sequence and all these things. And it's always at the top of his mind not to burn his guys out, not to overdo it, put them in a compromising situation. So that's how you lead, number one. But number two, like the notion that all these, managers or these business owners are out there and they don't care about their guys and that they're, just out there breaking their back and they're just a number to them. To me, especially with a guy like you who's very clearly a good leader, it's just false. It's just not true. Do those people exist in the industry? Probably, but it's so competitive right now that you don't have to be in that situation. And anybody that doesn't lead like that is going to be out of business like real quick.
100%, especially because more and more business owners that I talk to, right, run their companies maybe not exactly like I do, but very similar, right? So whether you're an electrician, plumber, metal trades, whatever you're in, the whole old school adage of just, these are the trades guys, the fields guys, that's really gone. I mean, these guys are trade professionals. And so they're treated as such, right? Because they're pros at what they do. So they're the best in there. I'm always trying to get the best guys, the best equipment, because you can do the best job for your clients, have the biggest revenue, the most profitability, reward your people, and it just becomes a big cycle, right? So, I mean, we have all kinds of cool stuff we do at Wildcat for, rewarding guys between, their review cycles, between, birthday Mondays, anniversary Mondays, all kinds of cool incentives. That was the word I was looking for. Profit sharing programs. I mean, all kinds of stuff to keep it fun.
So even for field guys, even for guys that in a trade that many people would say is not a skilled trade, right? A lot of people would say that, but you're out there and you're incentivizing them to do better. You're providing rewards. And again, it's just not the back-breaking, slave driving that you think it would be, right? Profit sharing, huge thing. You're seeing it more and more in the industry. Again, to have a profit share in a situation where the other comment that I get all the time is like, oh, well, it's one thing in union cities, but in red states, it's totally different. It sucks in their minimum wage, and you don't know what you're talking about. I do know what I'm talking about. You guys aren't paying minimum wage. You're incentivizing people. You're giving them profit share. You're making it as lucrative as you possibly can for them to stay competitive. It is not easy in Florida to run over 100-man company without people trying to come in and poach. So, the proof is in the pudding that you're able to keep that many people for that long. You have to be paying them. You have to be compensating them. I want to ask one more thing before we wrap it up. How did you start the business? Like, how did you get your first client, right? Was it just you by yourself? You're like, hey, I'm Al. I have a concrete saw. I'm going to cut this up for you. And what's been your biggest challenge to grow the company from just Al, or if you had a partner, or whatever that looked like?
So when I first came to the Southwest Florida area, okay, there's different lead generation services that you can purchase.
What do you mean by lead generation?
So general contractors will basically put out into databases, like Blue Book is one of them, and it's very inexpensive. So you basically would sign up for this online lead generation, and any business owner could do this. Any person who's looking for a job could do this. So basically, when I came to Florida, I looked on Blue Book and found what's called an invitation to bid, or an ITB, and so I went to my first pre-bid meeting, and there was a general contractor standing there, and it was his job, so he was CM at risk, and then he had some demo contractors and some electricians and some plumbers. And so
do you have anybody behind you, like, at this point? Like, is it just Al with
it's
with
like
a logo?
me showing up.
It's just you.
Hi, here I am.
Yeah, right.
So literally, like, I showed up and I walked up and I shook the guy's hand and said, hi, my name's Al Miller, and I want to do this job for you. And I don't know what it's going to take, but I want to be the demo contractor on this job. So that was how that started. As the meeting progressed, I kept raising my hand and asking question after question. There's probably like 20 or 30 people there. And he almost looked annoyed because I kept asking his question, but I wanted to make sure he recognized my face, right? So he knew who I was, so that way, like, he couldn't just, I didn't want to just be yeah,
he's not going to forget Al.
Yeah, 100%. This guy's going to remember me, okay? Yeah. So anyway, so I did that, and then I submitted my estimate to do the demo work, and then I started calling him and emailing him almost daily, maybe twice a day, and kept asking for the job. Hey, what do I got to do? Hey, what do I got to do? I think I even went to his office. Obviously, the secretary didn't let me through the door, but I tried, and I left my card there.
You got space in his head. He can't think about anybody else but Al.
Yep. So eventually we won the job, right? So we got the job. Didn't have much to start with. I mean, I had a hammer and a bunch of experience. So
you did have a hammer, but you had all your teeth.
Yes, I did have my teeth. Yeah. Got one, and then as that one got going, started bidding on other work. I had been very fortunate because I started to get to know some of these guys. So the construction industry is unique in that, or at least I feel like it's unique, because it's once you kind of start putting yourself out there, and if you reach out to people, people will reach back out. So especially if they can see that you're, competent, you're professional, you're honest, right, and that your numbers are in the middle, right. So you're not the super high guy, you're not the super low guy trying to buy the job. You're there and you're trying to make a long-term career out of this, right. So you want to build relationships, you want to be here, and we want to do this job, we want to do the next 10 jobs with you.
So you said something that I want to highlight. I always talk about the power of asking questions, right, and bringing value to other people, understanding their needs and protecting your client, right, like a way, and to the point where you might almost be annoying, right? And sometimes I look at my phone when Al calls me and I'm like, oh shit, like he's going to bring something to my attention that I don't want to deal with. But there's, as much as I don't want to deal with it, there's nobody else that I'd rather have on the job, because I know that I don't know demo as much as Al knows, right? And that when there is a problem or there's something that I should be aware of or something that's going to get me in trouble, whether it's his scope or not, he's going to bring it to my attention. And that is a value that I can't replace regardless of where his number is. You know what I mean? Like, I always want Al to be on the job. So you're just always trying to bring value to other people, right? Now, as you grew, what was the toughest thing? What was the biggest issue that you had?
So there are probably two biggest challenges. I would say that the whole COVID thing was kind of its own weird. I mean, that was only a couple of years ago, but that was pretty tough. We lost millions and millions of dollars worth of backlog instantly.
How big were you at the time?
We're probably 60, 70 guys-ish, 75-ish.
Still pretty big.
Yeah, I mean, it's because it's, 2 years ago? So yeah, 75 probably. But like one day, when it was all kind of happening, right? It was like everybody's watching TV and, everybody says, oh, don't touch anybody and everybody's going to die and whatever. We lost millions of dollars worth of what they call backlog, or like these were jobs that we had.
Jobs that you had in the future, they're coming, they're already in the books, we're going to do them, and then poof, they're gone. We're not making that money anymore.
They're gone. I mean, they're just gone.
Right.
And my biggest fear in that moment wasn't necessarily for myself or my family. It was for what am I going to do for all my guys, right? Like a lot of these guys, while they make a really good living, I mean, they're still, they're not as far along as say I am, or maybe other business owners. So if they're going to miss a bunch of work, what is going to happen? And if all these other jobs are shutting down, because it's not like they can go to a different industry. Like it was, that was a pretty scary time. So I would say that was one of the big challenges. When the company was younger and smaller, the biggest challenge was for me as a business owner was having the capital needed to grow as rapidly as we could, because we were building relationships, and so more people are then wanting to hire us, but it's a push and a pull, because you want more people to hire you, but you want to make sure you're providing the service that they expect.
Yeah, you don't want to get out over your skis.
You got it. If you get out of your skis, you're going to fall, right? Mm-hmm. And for me, because of my time in Straight, and because of me living in a car, and because of all that, I was always afraid of debt, and so I never liked to borrow money, right? So I wanted to do a job, bill my job, get paid on my job. Ooh, now I can afford to go buy this used truck. All right, now I got 2, now I got 3, now I got 4, now I got 5. Oh, now I can afford some new ones. Okay, we're growing, but we're not accumulating debt because of my own personal,
And I think a lot of people would combat that, right? They'd say, debt's how you grow, right? That's like the hot thing. Yeah, leverage money. Like, don't pay your mortgage. Like, you know what I mean? Right. Like, take out as much money as you can.
Where I was very much the opposite, right? So I probably could have grown, faster earlier, but I wanted to be conservative and make sure that no matter what happened, right? And I tell my men this all the time, like, we're positioned that if Wildcat cut in half, I can still, maintain it, right? It's we got through the last recession of 10 and 11. We can get through, because there will be a market correction at some point. We can get through that one together, right? So I think the capital piece in the early market and the coronavirus piece, then downstream were the two.
So you're at a point now where I bet you could probably take your foot off the gas a little bit and the machine would run itself. You don't. You're very, very, very involved, especially on the bigger projects, getting into the details, walking everything, and communicating to guys like myself. What's in the future for Al? What keeps Al going forward? What keeps Al's foot on the gas?
So I love what I do, honestly. I mean, I love what we do. So I like finding the most complex selective demolition and concrete cutting projects that involve shoring and roof removal that I can possibly find and figure them out. They're like giant puzzles. And so I really enjoy what I do. So I think that's one. I mean, over the next year, we're moving to a new headquarters, so I'm super excited about that. We'll have an 11,000 square foot facility on 5 acres, and we need it all. So that's super exciting. So for me personally, like, is getting the new headquarters all set up and implementing more and more technology into the company. We have a big inventory room, and now we have these guns that basically it's like almost checking out at Home Depot or something, right. And stuff like that I really enjoy, because it's standard operating procedures and it creates efficiencies, and the guys can move, they get what they need, and I know where it's all going. And long term, over the once we move to our new headquarters in October, a year from that, I'd like to open another branch in Sarasota and start moving up north, up the coast. I'm at this point, I'm not interested in going to like the Miami side of the state. We do some projects over there for some bigger clients, like they'll win them, ask us to come, and we'll go do that job. I've just found, for me personally, that's a different kind of speed, a different. It feels like a different country sometimes, quite frankly, to me than Southwest Florida. So the goal is to go, up the Gulf Coast and then maybe go over to Orlando, because we operate so well in hospitals and assisted living facilities. I think we'll market really well in like an Orlando type market, in the like Disney, Universal, hospitality, hotels, stuff like that.
Basically what you're talking about is facilities, large facilities that have critical operations that have to stay operational while you're in there tearing stuff apart.
100%.
And they can't know that you're there at all.
Yep,
it has
100%.
to be as though you're not there. Al's pretty good at that. We did a small hospital job together.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that about wraps it up. I really appreciate you for coming in. I seriously think that this is going to be a pretty profound interview. This is the first interview I've ever done. So
Did a really good job.
Yeah. I think you did a really good job. You did all the talking. Guys, go back, check this out. There's some profound stuff in there. I appreciate Al coming in. Again, Al runs Wildcat Renovation. If you're in Southwest Florida and you are looking for a job opportunity and you don't know what to do,
come on
in the construction industry, reach out to me. I'll hook you up with Al. I'll pay it forward. Thanks, Al.
Got it. Thank you.